Did you know the American Heart Association has published updated dietary guidance that outlines 10 recommendations for improving your nutrition and your heart health? If you want a higher quality of life and a longer, healthier life, you won't want to miss today's episode of Ask Dr. Walt.
Today, our health includes our mind, our body, and our spirit. Separating medical facts from fiction is the key that leads to wise decisions about our health and well-being. Unpacking the latest research is vital. Doing what works helps us live our best lives today. How can we live longer? How can we live healthier? Let's ask Dr. Walt on Liftable TV.
Hi, everyone, and a Happy New Year from all of us here at Liftable TV. I'm family physician Dr. Walt Larimore, and I'm delighted you're taking some time today to join me in my home office as we examine some of the dietary resolutions you may wish to consider for 2022. In fact, the American Heart Association has published an updated dietary guidance that outlines 10 recommendations for improving diet quality and cardiometabolic health in the U.S. The new study is published in the journal Circulation and encourages the consumption of fruit and vegetables, whole grains, lean and high fiber protein, and liquid non-tropical plant oils. It discourages the consumption of ultra-processed foods, red meat, added sugars, and high amounts of salt. And joining me to explore these new recommendations is my dear friend Sherry Flint. Sherry has an undergraduate degree in health education and a Master of Public Health degree. She's been a registered dietitian for over 30 years and now manages the Center for Nutritional Excellence at Advent Health in Orlando, Florida, where she leads a team that includes dietitians, an executive chef, an exercise specialist, and a licensed clinical social worker, all of whom have a passion for helping people live their healthiest lives. In fact, Sherry teamed up with her center's executive chef to create a cookbook that shows healthier eating can be delicious. Sherry, good to see you and welcome to Ask Dr. Walt.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
On this new year, hopefully a better new year for all of us and our viewers. And I want to start at the beginning because you are an expert. Advent Health is an advocate for whole foods. Now, we're not talking about the grocery store. So when we talk about whole foods and these new recommendations, what are they and why should I eat more of them?
I think the easiest way to picture whole foods is eating as close to the natural state as possible. So think apple, applesauce, apple juice, apple pie. You know, each step gets further away from that apple as it was hanging on the tree. And you lose nutrition and some very vital nutrition as you get further and further away. And we know that natural package, that whole food package, actually is where you're going to get those powerhouses of vitamins and minerals and fiber and antioxidants and phytochemicals that are so essential for really being healthy and living our best life.
So if I put ice cream on the apple pie, that doesn't qualify.
Yeah, I mean, some people are like, yeah, that's dairy, right? But yeah, no.
It might make me fill up the whole chair. And so when we think about sugars, for example, there's the new guidelines say no added sugars and don't mention the natural sugars. What are the difference and how do you explain that to patients and clients?
Well, it is very easy to get confused on that point because we think sugar is sugar is sugar. And when we're talking health, the natural sugar, like you would find in an apple, an orange, any piece of fruit, because that comes in the natural packaging, it comes with all the fiber and all those phytochemicals and all those other great nutrients, that does not have the exact same impact on our bodies as just pulling the sugar out and adding it to something or just eating it straight. So we know that added sugar is a source of inflammation in the body, which can lead to Heart disease, there's some indication. Of course, we know a higher sugar diet has impact around diabetes. Certain cancers, you're at a higher risk when you're eating a very high sugar diet. So again, the natural sugars, because they're in that whole package, are a very different story, and it's a great source of energy, right? So we don't want to totally exclude those. But I will say the one thing to keep in mind, baby steps, to go from a high sugar diet, a high added sugar diet, to no sugar is not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, so give yourself time and take that one step at a time. And when you're finding those foods, those whole foods that are low or no added sugars, there's lots of them. It's just a matter of picking and tasting and finding out what works for you and what works for your family, right? And I guess the same thing would be true for protein sources, other carbohydrate sources, and even the good fats compared to the bad fats. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. I think baby steps that's a very important concept to keep in mind when moving towards healthier eating. You don't have to change everything overnight, no big extreme changes, just those little steps, and they start adding up, and you're just eating healthier and healthier. And of course, that's very positive for the body.
You know, we found that I need to let our viewers know that you and I wrote a book together, 15 years ago.
2005.
Was it 15? Anyway, it was when we were younger.
2005.
And so, Supersized Kids, How to Protect Your Family from the Obesity Threat. And we took that tact, both in the book and in the study that we performed, that families can't change everything overnight. They need to change things a little at a time. And when they did, they were not only successful, they were amazingly successful.
Yes. And I think that's the beauty of keeping in mind those baby steps. I always like to say baby steps really result in huge health benefits and research backs that up. Research backs up even small changes can start reducing your risk for heart disease, better blood sugar control. So it doesn't have to be those big, overwhelming, very stressful changes.
We also endorse cooking as many meals at home as opposed to eating out. Is that still recommended?
Yes. And I kind of chuckle when you say that, because obviously in the last 18 months, more and more people have been eating at home, right? So they come to us, okay, I don't want to go out to eat. I'm a little concerned about being out in public right now. I need to be cooking more at home. How do I do that? So yes, it again gives you the opportunity to control what's going into your food, which can be healthier. But that's kind of been forced on us a little bit over the last 18 months.
There are baby moms who are just busy and they're saying, well, I'd like to cook more at home, but how do I find the time? What are some time-saving tips that can help our busy parents at home?
Yep. So planning. That to me is the key. You don't it's okay, I just got home from work, it's Monday, I've got to put dinner on the table. You open the fridge and what am I going to do? Planning. I encourage people, take an hour, maybe Saturday, Sunday, whatever day works best for you. Sit down and get the kids involved. They're more likely to eat what's going on the table if they're involved. And take time to come up with at least 3 or 4 days. Here's what we're going to have. Then you look at what you have on hand around the menu you just created. Create your shopping list for what you need. Go and just get that. I encourage people, don't get too caught up in impulse buying. And then come home and spend maybe 30 minutes or an hour prepping. You can cut vegetables and they'll last for several days. You can do a lot of that ahead of time, but planning is the key.
And then, Sherry, it doesn't take any more time to cook 5 of the same meal at once for most people. And so cooking and then packaging in small packages for future meals, right?
Yes. So there are many, many foods that you can batch cook and lend themselves very well to being frozen. So, like a casserole, and again, you can make healthier versions of that. Veggie lasagna, there's all kinds of things. You can make a big batch. And I would encourage people, go ahead and cut it into the appropriate serving size and freeze the individual servings. So you don't, if just one person wants that, they can pull it out and heat it up without now heating the whole pan again.
And families can do this together. 2 or 3
Yes.
parents
Yes.
can get together and have a Sunday cooking fest, or
Yes. Right.
even been faith communities and churches that use the church kitten and buy food in bulk for members. So lots of ways to think about it. But we're talking, and what you're talking about is good food, good nutrition, not necessarily a dieting mindset. What are some of the negative implications of this idea of dieting when it comes to health?
Definitely in the last couple of years, there have been more and more negative connotations to the word dieting. And of course, the word diet itself, back in the day, right, just kind of meant how you were eating. Now it really is a whole different meaning. It's really, to me, the most negative part about dieting, and of course, the word die is in there, and that's how most people feel when they are trying to lose weight, is that you tend to get in this mindset of, oh, wow, I had a potato chip, I'm no good. Or I did this and I'm a failure. And that really is why dieting in the long term doesn't really work, because your body needs nutrition, and dieting in and of itself is restrictive. So you wouldn't want to keep that up for a long period of time. But because we tend to indulge in treats every now and then, or like I said, pick up a chip and eat that, and we always then have negative self-talk around that, where if you just start thinking, I'm going to eat healthier and maybe still have some of my favorite treats, then you have more positive self-talk, and you can start saying, hey, I really succeeded. I had 3 vegetables today. I had the apple instead of the apple pie today. So it's much more positive self-talk that we engage in when we focus more on healthy eating than dieting.
And finding that good food, plant-based diets, of course, excellent nutrition plan, but it can be a hard transition for people who aren't plant-based to get there. It's not the only way to be healthy, and you can get there step by step, right?
Yes, yes. There is actual research that shows, of course, going totally plant-based is a healthy option. Other research shows those baby steps. You're still using animal protein. You go with the leaner choices, but now you're incorporating more plant foods, because most people eat what we call the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which is high in salt, high in added sugar, high in added fat, and very high in red meat. So just even starting to have more of the lean meats, less salt, less added fat, less added sugar, and just putting more plants on your plate moves you in that healthier direction.
Well, and cutting back on fast food, cutting back on restaurant food, and even packing healthful lunches for your kids.
What a concept.
But those are simple steps that people can begin to take, even cutting one fast food meal a week, and maybe letting your kids carry healthful food instead of the school food.
Right. Yes. Well, and I think, again, talking about meals, as we discovered when we were writing Supersize Kids, families eating together tend to be healthier, and especially the children, and especially when it comes to childhood obesity. Just sitting around the table, having that meal together, those conversations makes a world of difference, especially for the kids. So I think you really cannot overstress and overdo eating meals together as a family. And as you said, we tend to be a fast food society. So start out one less meal a week. Then you move it up to 2 or 3 fewer fast food meals a week. And it makes a huge difference. It really does. Families reconnect when they're eating together.
Yeah, in fact, I've said on this program before that the research is clear. The more meals per week that a family has together by every single health measure, children do better, whether it's performance in school, whether it's behavior, whether it's sleep, whether it's physical health, and we could go on and on and on. Sure, we've talked about food, but let's include liquid in that. What we drink is important. What guidance do you give clients and patients?
Always remember the beverage of choice is water. Now, that can be infused water. But, water gets a little boring, right? After a while, people are like, I really need a different taste. So again, thinking of things that have less added sugar And I remember working with a client who had gained a significant amount of weight, wasn't quite sure why that happened. So as we were talking, I just asked, well, what kind of sugary drinks are you having? And the response was from 6 p.m. to midnight every evening, I have a case, which is 24 12-ounce cans of regular Pepsi.
Why?
Right. So that was really then where I realized, let's just start there and let's not cut them all out now because, well, of course, the caffeine withdrawal and, everything else. But little by little, switch those sugary beverages. And for some people, I'm even okay if you go to a diet drink, but then you move on from there. Get that added sugar out. Make your way to those like herbal teas. Of course, straight up water is my preference. Green teas, different things that also have antioxidants, but moving away from the highly sugared beverages, because I find it so fascinating how our brain does not sense liquid calories like it does food calories, and you can drink a lot of sugary beverage before you're going to feel full, and that's a lot of calories.
Sherry, what's your advice to clients and patients when it comes to the artificial sweeteners, sucraloses, and those sorts of things?
Yeah. That is one of those areas that I typically let them know that professionally, it's really their decision, because you can find research on both sides of that. Research that says it's fine in moderation. That is the key, moderation. And there is research that shows at a higher level there could be some concern. But I think the thing is, you always want to move towards more water. That is really the direction you want to go. More water.
And it's being mindful. You talk about that, about being mindful about what we eat and how we eat and when we eat, being mindful about what we eat and what we drink. How do you define mindful eating, and what are the benefits of mindful eating?
Well, that, of course, is a concept that's been around for years, but really has hit, I think, our society's consciousness in just the last few years. To me, it's being in the moment, being present, tasting, feeling, smelling, looking at all the beautiful colors on your plate, being aware. I like to use the example, and if I'm with a group of people, I'll out and say, hey, raise your hands. How many of you have been watching TV? You have a bag of chips, and the next thing you know, the whole thing's gone. And you don't even remember eating more than a couple of chips, because our brain really can only focus on one thing at a time, and it will focus on TV and not on eating, or it'll focus on the computer and not on eating. So removing distractions, focusing on eating, and again, the taste, the smells, how does it look? How does it feel in your mouth? And enjoy that. Mindful eating is also enjoyable eating. And what we have learned is you tend not to eat as much because you're satisfied. We've all had that meal where we inhale it and then we're looking for the next thing to eat because it just did not hit the spot. And that's because we're not paying attention. But mindful eating, we tend not to eat as less. We do enjoy it more. And that's very, very important.
And would you include in that smaller portions, eating more slowly, those tips that you've given for decades?
Together. Yes. And with mindful eating, if you are in the moment and you are looking at the food, you're really tasting it. How does it feel? How does it smell? That automatically slows you down.
Got it. Well, being at a healthier weight helps improve my quality of life, my quantity of life, can help with chronic medical conditions. When we wrote the book, we talked about the importance of nutrition, also movement, exercise, and even good sleep. Do you consider those co-equal, or would you put nutrition at the front of the line, or how do you recommend balancing those three paths to good health?
Yes. As a dietitian, of course, my first inclination is nutrition. But when you really dig into the research and look at how does this play out in someone's everyday life, they are equal. You cannot out eat, never moving, sleeping only 3 or 4 hours a night. I don't care how well you are eating, it will eventually catch up with you. And we know the lack of sleep raises cortisol levels, which changes your sense of fullness and satisfaction. So you aren't going to eat as well just because of other things going on in your body. Of course, physical movement, if you were to only exercise and have 3 or 4 fast food meals a day or really high calorie meals, you can't exercise enough to really undo all those calories and fat and salt and sugar. So it takes all three, I think, in equal doses to really have that healthy, balanced life you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think it surprised most of my patients to learn how important a good night's sleep is. That poor night's sleep or short sleep changes our hormones in a way that can impact us. Well, we're talking about New Year's resolutions, this new year, 2022. If the average family had to make one nutritional resolution, what would be your number one recommendation?
For a family, I would say eating together at home. Just because when you start looking at if you're eating at home, you can control what goes on the table, what goes in, whatever you're preparing. Then that also brings in all that interaction that we're learning. Social interaction, I think, is as important as the nutrition and the exercise and the appropriate amount of sleep. Especially over the last year and a half, we've seen what not having that social interaction, especially on kids, what that does. And so for families to do that, which is not easy, because when I say that, and I know, Dr. Walt, you are 100% on board with this, that means the TV's off, no electronic devices at the table. People think they're eating together, but they're all on their phones or tablets. So none of that. So really sitting down and having a conversation around the dinner table while you're eating is, I think, one of the best resolutions a family could make. I
don't think there's any question about that. At our table, we call it an EFC, an electronic free zone. For kids, for guests, for parents, for everybody. Right. And I've said this in other programs, but looking at Scripture, we see from the beginning of the Bible to the very end, the spiritual and relational value. Jesus in his Last Supper, and in Revelation they talk about in future heaven, the banquet table, and all the Old Testament feasts that revolved around food, and Jesus' relationships and his miracles with family meals were critical. So it seems like everything in Scripture backs everything you're saying, Sherry, and that's the... What would be your final advice, your final sermon as we boil down to the last minute or so of the show?
I think that I would encourage individuals, as you're looking at what you want to do from a health perspective for 2022, think small. Those small little changes make such a difference. And a lot of people I'm going to change totally how I'm eating, but maybe, again, starting small might mean, okay, I'm going to have one additional vegetable every day. And then when you feel like you have that under your belt, you can move to, now instead of refined grains, I'm switching to whole grains. But think those small changes. And you cannot underestimate the power of plants. As you mentioned just a few minutes ago, plant-based eating or plant-forward eating, which means putting more plants on your plate. That is, again, something that there is tremendous health benefits just from adding a few extra plant foods to your day.
So finally, Sherry, as our time's running out for this program, what's the name of your cookbook? How can folks find out more about it and get a copy?
So Amazon is probably the most convenient way to find a copy. It's called The Art of Eating Well, Simply Healthy. It also is a diabetes edition, so all of the recipes are carbohydrate friendly, and especially for someone with diabetes, heart disease, or just wanting to eat healthier, the chef created many very delicious recipes. And
that's the point. Go through it, find the ones that work for you. Don't use the ones that don't.
Right.
Sherry, thanks for being with us. I look forward to future programs, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
And thanks to each of you for joining me for this episode of Ask Dr. Walt. And I'd love you to drop by my website and sign up for my free daily email. It's at drwalt.com. That's drwalt.com. And until our next visit, let's eat better. Let's move more towards true health physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. And dear friends, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that it may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. See you next time.